This episode of GMspiration is brought to you by Rocky Granitebrew's newest book, Granitebrew's Introduction to Necromancy and Mushroom Beer. Got a friend who has it all? Need a gift for a budding dwarven wizard and not sure what? Look no further with Granitebrew's Introduction to Necromancy and Mushroom Beer, a perfect midwinter or Hogswatch present. In this page-turning tome, Granitebrew explores the fungal undead with a unique beer twist. Waste not, want none is this dwarf's motto. Raise fungal minions and harvest their mushrooms for a tasty beverage with this unique take on necromancy. Order now to receive 10% off Granitebrew's other titles, including Eat, Laugh, Resurrect, and How to Resurrect Friends and Influence Zombies. Dungeons & Dragons has a lot of statistics and a lot of text. Just so much. The vast majority of which you don't need 99% of the time. As such, you can fall into the trap of having to flip between many pages, especially during combat. If you have 1 or 2 creatures to manage, that's probably fine. But what if you have 6 or 7 different types of creatures? What if they're on different pages? This could be pretty annoying. Welcome to GMspiration. I'm Harley, and in my 7 tips to help you DM video, I ran through how to write up simple creature stats to save time and effort. I'm going to expand on that here, and how you can make minimized creature stats on the fly. We'll run through a table that you can use to help make your stats, and then we'll make 2 groups of enemies. This method is incredibly useful when a fight breaks out, either when you're not expecting it, or when the characters have gone somewhere you're not expecting them to go. I'm also going to go through how to simplify and note down spells and spell-like effects. So let's start with picking up the important parts of a simple stat block, the commoner. Here you can see the 2024 D&D stat block. It's fairly standard, although I will admit training is an interesting addition from the 5e version. It's like the designers were wanting DMs to be able to use this for other things like artisans, performers, and the like. So if proficiency is a 2, and you've watched my video on dice math, you know that we can add 5 to simulate advantage. So the average roll is going to be 18. The average of a d20 roll is 10.5, which we round up to 11. Then we plus 2 for proficiency and plus 5 for advantage, giving us 18. So you could probably just give them an 18 on whatever check you want them to be good at. But I'm going to remove that for now, and let's keep only the important stuff that we need to use. So here we have it. Commoner, AC 10, hit points 4, club with plus 2 to hit, and 1d4 damage. That's it. I'll remember that a club will do bludgeoning damage. I know there is a bit of a joke about commoners all having clubs on them. Think of this club as more of an improvised weapon, maybe a bucket, broom, a candlestick for example. If they do have a dagger, or if the implement's sharp like a broken bottle, you'd change that to piercing damage. If they've got a sickle, or maybe a large serrated knife, you could change that to slashing damage. Now looking at this minimized stats, you might rightly ask about saving throws and ability checks. In a fight, not many ability checks trigger, but grapples are one example of when it does. Grapples require an athletic check to make, and an athletics or acrobatics check to avoid. We'll have a vague idea if your creature is strong or fast, so the commoner is probably neither, and I'll do plus 0 for both. An orc though, I'll ballpark it as a plus 2 to athletics. Let's be honest though, most of the time you'll roll a dice and you'll know the result. If you roll a 4 or 5, doesn't really matter what their bonus is. Roll a 17 or 18, they're probably going to succeed. It's only if you get towards the middle of the roll that you'll actually need to check what the bonus is. So that's it for the commoner. But now, what if I wanted to make something else, like a squire? Well, I could use a stat block that I think similar, like a guard, but how would I make one from scratch? And importantly, how would I make one from scratch on the fly during a game? To make this possible, let's rely on the most important tool for a DM, a table. Here's the table I use, at least roughly. Why roughly? Well, that's because it may change depending on the characters at the table. If I have 2 tanky melee units and a healer, I might up the damage a little bit. Lots of high AC characters, maybe I'll up the 2 hit. So what we have here to explain the table is level 1 to 4 in the first 3 columns. You have your attack bonus, your damage die, and your plus to damage. So on that first one, it's plus 2 to the attack roll, 1d4 damage, and either plus 0 or plus 1 to damage. The ratings determine how hard it is, with bump, something that slows down the PCs but does not pose a real threat. A setback, something that could stop or delay the PCs temporarily. Hard, something that poses a challenge, requiring the use of resources like leveled spells and abilities. Dangerous, something that requires the PCs to work together to overcome. And deadly, a serious challenge that could kill them if they're not careful. Other thing to keep in mind is the ratings represent groups of enemies, but how many are going to be dependent on the makeup of your players. 3 level 1s is very different fight from 5 level 4s, even though they're in the same column. So let's use this table and I'll show you how it works. I'll generally start with an introductory one-shot off with a small fight near the start. So let's say I have 4 level 2 PCs. I want this to be a bump. It slows them down, but doesn't stop them. Our tables say the enemy should have plus 2 to their attack, deal 1d4 damage, and either plus 1 or plus 0 to their damage rolls. If I was making this for level 5 characters, it would be +3 on their attack roll, 1d6 damage, and then either +1 or +2 to their damage rolls. I'm going to go with 4 goblins. If you have more enemies than PCs, it can skyrocket the difficulty. Keep that in mind, as they can easily be overwhelmed. Now, one thing the table doesn't have is AC and hit points. When calculating AC, I will use the general 2 hit bonus of the players. I go into this in more detail in my dice math video, but basically you add 5% likelihood to hit for each one you add, starting with 10 AC at 50%. If that sounded like gobbledygook, then I'll run through a quick example. Let's say our PC has a +5 to hit. Against an AC 10, they start off with 50% chance to hit. They then add 5% for each +1, of which there's 5. So 50, 55, 60, 65, 70, 75. They have a 75% chance to hit. If our creature's AC is at 12, it cancels out 2 with a bonus. So a PC with a +5 to hit against an AC of 12 has a 65% chance of hitting the creature. Generally, D&D is designed that monsters have low armor class but high hit points. You hit them more often, but they take more damage to bring down. That's why it's common for monsters to have more hit points than our players. Our PCs have a +4 to hit, so I'm going to give the goblins a 12 AC. In-game, I'll justify this by saying the goblins are wearing no armor, but they are small and nimble, so the PCs will have a 60% chance to hit. That seems like a fun amount. There are some creatures that have very low AC, such as zombies with an AC of 8 or a gelatinous cube with an AC of 6. Both of these substitute low AC for high hit points. Calculating hit points is likewise some of a dark art. Think of it in terms of hits. How many standard hits to take them down? A firebolt at this level does 1 to 10 damage. A barbarian with a great axe is probably doing 1d12 plus 3 damage, so somewhere between 4 and 15. So a solid 8 for HP would, for most characters, be 2 hits or 1 high damage hit. So we'll stick with 8 HP. Now, I also know that goblins have nimble escape, so I'm going to add that in. I'll remember what nimble escape means, but if you need to make a note of it, nimble escape allows a goblin to use disengage or hide as a bonus action. So here is my stat block for a goblin bump. AC 12, HP 8, dagger or darts, +2 to the attack roll, 1d4 plus 1 damage, and nimble escape. Not bad. Our PCs should take them out pretty quickly and get used to their characters. So our PCs have now defeated our goblin bumps. Now they have come into the goblin camp where there are some stronger goblins. Now we can make a tougher fight for them. I want to stay around the same number of goblins as PC, but I'm going to go with 2 bumps, 2 setbacks, and 1 hard. For a setback, I'm going to increase the AC by 1 and HP by 2. Nothing crazy. Attack bonus goes to +3, and the damage to 1d6 plus 2. I've picked a 1d6 weapon, a scimitar, and a shortbow. So we have our goblin back. AC 13, HP 10, scimitar, shortbow, +3, 1d6 plus 2, and nimble escape. For the hard, we're going to go with +5 to hit points. Consulting the table, for our hard, we're going to go with +5 to hit, 1d8 plus 3 damage. I don't want this to die on the first round, so I'm going to up the HP to 18. It should be able to take a big hit and survive. Now, this is where I'm going to rely on my knowledge of abilities to use one of my favorites for any boss, the ability to substitute damage to one of its minions as a reaction. This is normally flavored by the creature grabbing one of the allies and holding them in front of it. Imagine the fight happens. The wizard fires off a firebolt, screaming towards the goblin boss. The goblin grabs one of his minions, pulling him in front of him, and the firebolt hits it instead of him. It then throws down the burning goblin and laughs. For weapons, I'm going to put in a rapier, which is 1d8 damage. For ranged weapons, I've changed it to a longbow. Now, longbows have the heavy property, but in D&D 2024, this means a creature needs to have a dexterity of at least 13 or have disadvantage on attack rolls. In 5e, it was linked to size. So in 5e, a goblin would be too small to use a longbow, but not so in D&D 2024. So here we have our hard goblin. AC 14, hit points 18, rapier/longbow, +5, 1d8 plus 3, nimble escape, and substitute. Then we can put these together in a little table, and here we have our goblins at the camp. Now, let's see how closely we got to the official stat block. Here is a goblin warrior. I will admit, I didn't realize until just now that goblins are Fey in 2024 D&D. That's a odd choice, but anyway. First things first, the AC of this goblin is a little higher, at 15, although technically the AC should be reduced by 2 if they're using their bow, as their AC includes a shield. There's also additional damage that has been added, similar to a sneak attack that occurs when they have advantage. That's a little 1d4 slashing damage if the attack roll has advantage. Mathematically, a 1d6 and a 1d4 plus 2 is not too different from 1d8, so it seems like this aligns pretty well with our Goblin Hard, except our Goblin has high hit points. If you're looking at my stat blocks and thinking, I could do better, or I'll put this in, or I'll change that, that's great. The way you write the stats should be tailored to you. I hate blocks of text, so I like sticking with small, simple notes. I don't need to write down the Goblin makes a melee attack roll, or that it does piercing damage. I'll remember that. But I may not remember Nimble Escape, unless it's written down. Now, you may have also noticed the table has a lot of overlap, and it does. It depends on what's really happening. The more enemies or the fewer characters, and I'll reduce the danger level. How I use this table for a group of level 1s is very different to how I'd use the table for a group of level 3s. You can also add in a column for DCs for spells, or what you can do is add 8 to the attack roll. Spell save DCs are 8 plus proficiency plus spellcasting modifier. Rather than calculating it again, you can just add 8 to the attack roll. Ends up as the same thing. The only time this wouldn't follow the rules exactly is if you had a creature using 2 different stats for different scores. For example, a paladin with high strength but low charisma. But for all intents and purposes, it works. I actually used this just a few days ago. I had 4 level 5 PCs, albeit with a lot of magic items that fought a deadly, 2 hard, and 4 bumps. There were some legendary actions and some healing, but it followed the basic process. This is where it really shines for improv. Say your characters are exploring a town and they find a Church of Bane. I can see a fight breaking out very quickly, and suddenly you need to figure out combat. So let's say our party was level 6, and you want this to be a challenging fight. After all, this is a well-resourced Church of Bane. Bane, well known for having strong fighters. Now you could quickly look up some stats, maybe try to flick through and find out what a knight is or what a guard might be, what the basic stats of a priest are. That can take a bit of time, and you'll probably have to modify the stats, as those don't align very well with each other. So let's say you describe the church having 2 guards, 2 priests, a head priest, and a paladin. There are also 4 commoners that take up arms, attempting to fight back the party. So we'll say our commoners are bumps, our guards and priests are set back, the head priest and paladin are hard. We're going to use our level 5 to 10 column for this one. So we have our common bump, AC 11, hit points 8, plus 3 to attack rolls, 1d6 plus 1 damage. Our guards, setback, AC 16, hit points 20, beer plus 4, 1d8 plus 2 damage. Our priests, AC 12, HP 25, and Sacred Flame. The DC is 8, which I've worked out by going 4 plus 8, and it does 1d8 damage. The head priest, AC 14, hit points 45, Sacred Flame, doing DC 15 and 2d8 damage. A paladin, AC 18, hit point 65, longsword plus 6, 1d10 plus 1d4 plus 4 damage. So you can see I've used the table and then I've modified things a little bit up and down. I've given the paladin 1d4 extra damage, which will be from Divine Favor. His weapon erupts, doing necrotic or radiant damage. The head priest, given their DC of 15, which would have been technically plus 7 on their attack roll. You could do 15 or 14. 15 seems like a nice round number, and it's significantly higher from the 12. AC for the paladin is quite high, with an 18, but I'm going to describe him as heavily armored. Last thing in, I will add cure wounds to the priest and head priest, perhaps lay on hands for the paladin. In terms of strategy, the guards and commoners and paladin rush the players, the priests heal the paladin and the guards, and Sacred Flame low dexterity opponents. So that's how I'd quickly throw together enemies during a session. Now you may be asking about spells and abilities. So let's apply the same summarization, and then we're going to add them into our tables. With spells, depending on how you run and the sort of game, how well you remember the mechanics, you'll want to pick a few key rules and mechanics to write down. Personally, I'm terrible at remembering specifics. I can tell you that a fireball is a 20-foot radius sphere, but is the range 100 or 120? Looking it up, it's actually 150. We also tend to forget if it's 8d6 or 6d6 off the top of my head. I know it's one of the two. Now, if I was going to write that down, I'm not going to write out the complete spell, but I can get away with fireball, 150-foot, 20-foot radius, 8d6. I've cut out a lot of info for the spell. It bends around corners, you do not need to see the target point to be able to cast it, and it's half damage on a save. Pretty much all leveled spells are half on a save though. It's a dex save, so I might write dex, but I can't think off the top of my head of a fire spell that isn't either an attack roll or dex saves. Except for heat metal, but that's technically not a save against the damage, it's the hold on to the weapon being heated. So with spells like heat metal though, you will need to write out a little bit more information. So here I've got heat metal, in brackets C for concentration, 60 foot, 1 metal object, 2d8 if touching, con or drop object, disadvantage if holding, bonus action, repeat. So heat metal, it's a concentration spell, it's got 60 foot of range, the target is one metal object, the damage is 2d8 if a creature is touching the object, and the creature has disadvantage if they're holding or wearing the object. The creature must make a constitution save or drop it if possible, and a bonus action to repeat the damage and check. I don't say the concentration lasts for a minute, but it's rare that combat will last for a full minute. I've picked out a few other random spells to demonstrate this. Acid Splash, Absorb Elements, Bark Skin, and Blade Barrier. So here we have Acid Splash, 60 foot, 5 foot radius, 1d6 acid. Absorb Elements, reaction, resistance to triggered damage, plus 1d6 trig damage next melee until next turn. Bark Skin, bonus action, touch, AC to 18. So you can see with those last two, I've put in a note, Absorb Elements is a reaction, and Bark Skin's a bonus action. I'm just going to assume all the other ones are actions. Blade Barrier, this is quite a long spell, so I've put in a lot more detail. It's concentration, we've got 90 foot range, we have a straight wall up to 100 foot long, 20 foot high and 5 foot thick, ringed wall up to 60 foot in diameter, 20 foot high and 4 foot thick. I've left in the words up to in there because that's an important addition to the spell. They can be smaller. The wall grants 3/4 cover and is difficult terrain. The dex 6d10 force damage. The damage triggers on cast when something enters the space, ends its turn inside, but there's only one save or damage per turn. So there you have it, tiny spells. Blade Barrier is the most complex, so it needed more space. The other ones I've kept pretty short. You could put in spell level if you wanted. I would put it in with name, so C Acid Splash or 0 Acid Splash. Really depends on what you're writing it for. It's very rare that I've had enemies run out of spell slots before the end of a fight. Let's take our creature and spell summaries and make a boss monster. Here's my Fire Wizard. He's under the level 5 to level 10 columns and a dangerous level. It's an AC of 16, which would be Mage Armor, hit points of 90. I've given him Fire Slap, Melee, plus 8, 2d8 damage, Firebolt, 120 foot, plus 8, 2d10 damage, Heat Metal, I've got my Heat Metal summary there. I've made up a new spell, Flame Pyre, which is a modification of Flame Strike, 60 foot, 10 foot radius, 4d6 dex, and Fireball, 150 foot, 20 foot radius, 8d6 dex. Also add in that Fire Slap is a modification to Shocking Grasp. What I really like about the way of setting up these creatures is it allows you to combine your creatures into a cohesive team. Let's make a Necromancer with a couple of minions. Now I love the concept of Necromancy. I'm currently working on a zombie video script, so I have a vision in my head for my players. They burst through the door to an old lab, hidden below the mortuary of a small town. The mad Dr. Zarg cackles hysterically, "You'll never take me alive!" From the benches, several zombies start to jerk to life, and Zarg points to the party. "Protect me, my minions!" From behind Zarg, a much larger creature under a sheet pulls itself free. The zombie behemoth awakes. So let's start up with these Zombois. Our players are level 4, certainly cannot use a stat block like Flesh Golem or a Necromancer, way too strong. I think I want Zarg to be weak, so we'll make the behemoth the strongest and put it at deadly. I find the zombie stat block really disappointing, so let's not use that either. I want an easy to defeat wave, a few stronger zombies, and then Zarg to actually be quite weak. So let's start with our little Zombois, the weakest. We're going to go with AC of 8, slow and easy to hit. I'll add in they only move 20 feet. It's pretty common for zombies. I'm also not going to allow them to dash. It seems a bit counterintuitive that they move slowly, but then they just run at you. I'm also going to raise their hit points a little bit, given it's got a much lower AC. So, using that column, we have Zombois Bump, AC of 8, hit points of 12, 20 foot movement, Fist has +2 to hit, and does 1d4 plus 1 damage. For the tougher zombies, our Zombros, I'm going to make them setbacks. I'll keep the AC as 8, but I'll raise the hit points to 18. Keep the speed the same, but I'll let these ones dash. For the Fist, I'll probably normally make it a +4 to hit, but I'm going to leave it as a +3 for now. If the party had high AC, I would certainly lift it up a bit. And then we have 1d6 plus 2 damage. Now I'm going to make Dr. Zarg a setback, but I'll increase his 2 hit, but lower his damage. So Chill Touch does +4 to hit and 1d8 necrotic damage. And just because I'm mean, I'm going to give him the ability to grant zombies advantage on their next attack roll as a bonus action. I'll flavor this as him turning dials on some nefarious zombie control device. Dr. Zarg setback. AC 12, HP 22, Dual Touch +4, 1d8 necrotic, bonus action, Zomb gets advantage on next attack. Next, we're working on Zom Big Bro Deadly. I'm going to keep the AC as 8 and the speed as 20, but I'm going to give him a charge attack action. I like the idea of it just running through the party. I like the attacks of opportunity to trigger, but only if they're not knocked prone. I'll leave in the word action because I might forget that it's supposed to be either the multi-attack or the charge. For damage, our deadly is 3d6. I'm going to change that to 2d8 and add +5. I'll give it multi-attack, but against 2 different targets only. Oh, and a +8 to hit. +8 means that our Dex DC is 16 for the saving throw for charge. You can change this, but 16 seems fine. No damage on a save for this one. I'll remember that, but you might want to put it in. You could have shorthand such as HDOS, half damage on save, or NHDOS, no half damage on save. That looks fine, but I'd like to make my monsters a little bit more interesting, so let's add in 2 triggers, when Dr. Zarg gets taken out, and when it gets taken down to half hit points. I like to imagine Big Bro grabbing Zarg, like a wild monster cradling its master. It would lose its multi-attack, but its damage gets much higher. So it's slower, but it's more likely to start one-shotting people. As for half health, we'll make it strike the ground in anger, causing everyone to make a strength save or be knocked prone, and taking 3d6 damage. This is a triggered action, so generally I wouldn't make it use a reaction. It just happens, and it only happens once. So here we have it, our Big Bro Deadly stat block. And that is our final zombie for the fight. You might find it might be a little bit too strong for your characters, in which case you may want to consider lowering the hit points a little bit on some of the zombies. Once they take out the weaker zombies, they should be able to defeat Big Bro pretty quickly. Question is whether or not they let Dr. Zarg get in much damage or not. Depends. We are picking deadly though, so they have to be smart about it. Next, let's move on to improvised damage. The last table I suggest is a list of DCs and damage. This is heaven for when trying to come up with the result of a player doing something ridiculous, like over-pressurizing a keg of beer so that it explodes. I've taken the original damage table for DC, and then I've added in 2 additional rows for bump and hard. So here we have it. This uses the same definitions as before. A bump slows down, a setback could stop or delay, hard poses a challenge, dangerous requires them to work together to overcome, and deadly is a serious challenge that could kill them if they're not careful. Sometimes when I put a challenge in front of my players, I let them describe what skill they're using and how they get through. So let's say the players are trying to get across a ditch filled with dangerous plants. The ditch is too wide to jump, so they have to find some other way. So for bump, the ditch is filled with cacti, DC 10, and on a fail, 1d6 piercing damage. PCs might try to throw a rope over, maybe they use mage hand or a grappling hook to tie it off and then climb across. Perhaps they try to move through the cacti, being careful not to get stuck by any of the prickles. If I'm going to raise it up to the next difficulty, it's filled with sharp cacti, DC 11, and on a fail, 1d10 piercing damage. For hard, it's filled with poison cacti, DC 12, on a fail, 1d6 piercing and 2d6 poison. Dangerous, it's filled with dangerous jagged cacti that embed in your skin, DC 14, 2d10 piercing. Deadly, the ditch is filled with dangerous jagged cacti that inject a powerful poison when their prickles break skin, DC 18, 2d10 piercing and 2d10 poison. Now you can switch the dice around. I'm not a massive fan of how the original table used d10s. I much prefer to use multiples of d6s and d8s. The easiest way to work out how to switch it is to work out the maximum and then use that number of a smaller dice. So 2d10, maximum of 20, relatively similar to 3d6. If in doubt, you always want to lean towards slightly less dice. So the average of 2d10 is relatively similar to the average of 3d6. There's a bit more math in here that you can kind of run through, but we've done quite a bit of math already, so let's leave that alone. So with that, I'm going to wrap up the episode here. We've talked about summarizing creatures down to key statistics and using the table to make monsters on the fly, how to simplify spells, and how to make boss monsters and come out with impromptu damage and DCs. Thank you so much for listening to this episode of GMspiration. Remember, the more you run D&D, the better you get at it, and of course, remember to have fun.